welcome to the Integrate This podcast. I'm Jeremy Mikla, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by David Berner, as always. And we're really fortunate enough to welcome not just one guest to our show today, we have two. As you can see, if you are watching this on YouTube, then you can definitely see the extra faces that have joined our screen here. And I would like to just give you a little bit of an introduction and we'll kind of get started and go from there. We are joined today by Marnie Stockman and Nick Coniglio. They are the co-authors of The Business of You, a guide to treating yourself as the most important project you will ever work on. Marnie went from being a high school math teacher to an ed tech leader before teaming up with Nick to run a software company. Nick started as a programmer, became an executive early in his career, and then jumped into entrepreneurship alongside of Marnie. They include selling their company and writing the award-winning Lead It Like Lasso. Together, they share stories and strategies to help students and educators turn leadership lessons into real life lessons. So, we kind of just said, I know you two are great at just kind of bouncing off of each other and chiming in whenever you need to. And so that's great. I don't know if you've talked amongst yourselves, like who would like to start here, but, thinking about your beginnings, your origin stories, how have you gotten to this point where, you, from your unique backgrounds, find each other to work together to come and collaborate and bring those perspectives into the things that you create and the things that you do?
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Nick finish the story. So I started out, like you said, as a high school math teacher. And I do think educators are often curious how you get from here to there. One of the things I like to say is I was selling pre-calculus to 16-year-olds. So when you land in the business world, some people will listen to you just based on that alone. Well, if she can sell pre-calculus, she might have some business skills along the way. But I landed in administration, and then in the school district, I was working with an ed tech platform, an assessment and analytics platform. Spoiler alert, Nick worked at that company. I ended up being hired to run customer success for that company, where I found Nick, who ran lots of technical departments along with customer support. So I will let him pick it up from there and then continue our path together after that.
Yeah, thanks, Marnie. We found ourselves, it was an assessment and analytics platform for K-12 districts, and we kept on getting acquired and acquired and acquired. And at some point down the road, Marnie being responsible for customer success and myself being responsible, part of my responsibilities was customer support. We kept hearing from the acquiring company that, our core value, our mission is raving fans, and we were responsible for the customer experience. And they kept increasing spend, investing in sales, and reducing their investment in the customer-facing teams that Marnie and I ran. So there became a real culture clash because both Marnie and I, our core value as well is raving fans, and we were not seeing that play out in real life. So finally, at some point, I think I sent a note, which in 2014, 15, whenever it was, that note was over a direct message saying, we know what we want to do. We should figure out if we can run a business on our own, build the business so we could actually do what we want to do, which is really to come back into education and help students and educators become their best versions at scale. So we did exactly that. We decided to leave with that culture clash. And at some point, we had signed non-compete, so we had to leave the education market for a couple of years. So we started a business for managed IT service providers, of all things, something we didn't necessarily know anything about. I was a technologist, but I really didn't use managed IT services very much. We all had done it internally, but we built a customer success platform. And the long story short is, in 3 years, we built it from nothing. We bootstrapped it, scaled it, and sold it for 8 figures so we could actually work on what truly was our passion project, which is all about, like I said earlier, helping people become the best versions of themselves at scale. And that's kind of where the books originated from. And it's been a wild ride for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say
Answer
too.
to your short question for sure.
Yeah, and so if we could kind of move into that a little bit, is you mentioned the book, and so the business of you. So what is the core philosophy of that book, the business of you? What does that mean?
So it's interesting because with researching Lead It Like Lasso and having our own leadership podcast and having sold a company, we've talked with tons of folks who have really been successful. And between Nick and me, we have mentored or helped students thousands at this point. And what we realized is they all had the same need. And the lessons we learned from all of the leaders that we had talked to is that the most successful people in this life, whether they realize it or not, were running their lives like a business, not in a corporate way, but in an intentional way where they understood who they were so they could understand where they wanted to go and how to get there. So the core philosophy in the business of you is, yeah, you are the CEO of your own life, but not like all the LinkedIn gurus would say, which is just, you need to be the boss of you. Well, yeah, that's super not helpful because they also need to be the head of HR, the head of marketing, the head of sales, their own chief financial officer. And we tell a story of Sydney, who's any one of us, any one of our students, a lot like our 20-something-year-old kids, who was just plodding down a path and needed to hear how to run themselves like a business to be successful.
So when you talk about that specifically as it relates to students or young people, we work with educators a lot, and so they're obviously constantly coming into contact with students. So what kind of mindset do younger people need to adopt to be able to move into thinking that way in the business of you mindset, where you're starting to consider all those things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think the mindset is really shifting from reaching to directing and being more intentional about how they lead themselves. You know, we often quote Adam Grant, and he coined the term years ago about the character revolution, right? And in this world of technology and automation and artificial intelligence all around us, what's really happening is the human skills, the softer skills are becoming the great differentiators. You know, we see it all the time when kids they're either applying for college or they're they're looking for that internship or that first job, where it used to be 10, 20, 100 applicants is now 500, 1,000, 10,000 applicants, right? And they don't know how to stand out and differentiate themselves. Our education system does a great job kind of working towards the base skills, those technical skills of math, reading, science, social studies, all those things. But at least in our experience, something's got to give, because there's just not enough time in the day. It's those softer, more interpersonal skills. So being intentional about going after those skills, we relate it to the business world. A lot of people find themselves living their lives like a startup without a strategy. And the whole notion of the business of you is to provide a framework and a story to get kids and career changers motivated to start to develop that strategy and have a plan and be intentional about it.
And are there common blind spots that you see when people are trying to figure that out, like running their own business, running their life? Is there, and maybe it is the soft skills that you had mentioned, but is that, or are there other common blind spots that people typically have that keep them from doing that?
I would say the initial blind spot is they're just following the path that they think is ahead of them instead of designing the path that's ahead of them. So, career and college readiness is a bit broken in that regard, because they are asking kids when they are in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, what they want to be when they grow up. And then they're getting filtered into that program. Nick and I often joke, we met someone who said that they liked to stay in hotels when they were in middle school. And so they got put in the hotel and hospitality track and sort of got to the end of high school and said, wait, how did I land here again? Instead of looking at their core values, who they are as a person, hotel and hospitality was actually the right spot for that person, but for the wrong reason, because what they were really good at was service, providing others, wanting to help others. They actually ended up going into education. And you can see that hotel and hospitality absolutely can be the right place to train students in how to be a great service member, a great educator, a great nurse. There are a lot of the same soft skills, to your point, that get them there. But the way folks are sort of channeled into a job, instead, it's more about the job job instead of who you are and how you bring value to whatever industry it is you might land in.
And I'll just add to that if I can. So the first department we visit in the business of you is the HR department, and we kind of position the HR department about really truly understanding who you are. And I think, I know this was true in my case. I was going along a path because my older brother went down a path in technology, right? It wasn't my path. I didn't take the time to reflect on what truly made me tick and what drives me as a person. And I think, to summarize it, I think that is the biggest blind spot for sure, is doing that self-reflection, probably because it's awkward and it's time consuming. And sometimes it's not almost all the times it's not the easy path. So I would layer a second blind spot on top of that, which is not surrounding yourself with different voices and perspectives to challenge you on are you truly doing that self-reflection? And we talk about that quite a bit as well in our book.
So do you think, like, though, continue with the blind spot here for just another moment here, but like, do we trap students into certain paths? I know you talked about the hotel and hospitality thing, without really broadening the availability of their experiences to see what else is potentially possible for them. And are there ways that schools and teachers could help, make that experience more open to all sorts of possibilities?
So I will tell you, the thing that comes to mind for me is I was assistant principal and I was observing our auto tech program, and there were 12-ish students in the class that I was observing, and 10 of them really wanted to be there. They were going to be auto techs. It was no question. This was the right place for them. 2 of them were causing, of course, 80% of the discipline problems. Why? Because, they didn't want to be there. And if teachers could have some support in helping figure out what landed you in auto tech, was it just alignment of schedules? Because that, for the record, happens and is a terrible solution. But if they were placed in that track for a reason, great with their hands, they don't want to sit behind a desk all day. Well, let's talk about the power of what you can get out of this program that is a transferable skill beyond auto mechanics. And it's funny because when I started this, I literally was just thinking about that class that I observed. But my son, who was not in an auto tech program in high school, became a technician and worked for a large company who was all driven on profit. And he wasn't allowed to help. Okay, you came in for a brake pad, but we really need to fix this. Words I don't know, so I won't pretend like I do. And he wasn't allowed to, because that wasn't how the business ran. And so when he and I talked, we said, let's talk about how you landed in auto tech. The things I said before, he likes working with hands. His hands. He likes problem solving. He doesn't want to sit at a desk all day. And he likes helping other people. And that's where his core values were clashing. And we said, what if you went and worked in IT in a school system? And that is what he does. He said, all I have to do is prioritize who has the biggest problem and help them Yes, I'm in, and he loves it. So I do think that we could help teachers expand they're in a program. The programs are solid. The programs have technical skills, but how can we also show what core value, what soft skills those types of programs bring to the party? Does that make sense?
Totally does. And I love how you bring that kind of personal story into it, which kind of almost leads me into the next area that I was going to go to anyway. Like, how important is it for that individual and to bring their personal narrative, their personal story into their pathway, whether it's towards leadership or towards the job, or if you want to think of it even more broader, bringing their own values to whatever career path they choose.
Critically, I'll let Nick answer, but that's my
Yeah,
answer. Critically.
it's everything. I think we like to say your story should be your strategy. We often hear we hear leaders who fail all the time, and it's so many times it's because they failed to develop some sort of authenticity and trust within the team. And leaders who understand their own story and their own narrative. So when we talk about the importance of narrative identity and leadership, those are the ones that are being successful in establishing the authenticity and the trust. And those are the ones who are able to inspire from a leadership perspective. And we believe storytelling is one of the most critical skills that is overlooked. I saw it. I hired people straight out of high school in the businesses that I ran, straight out of college. And I've seen over time kind of that curve go down where it's turned into more about just reciting credentials and facts, and so much less about really relating that to their own personal story. And not only is that a strategy, storytelling, to being able to communicate who you are, what drives you, what motivates you, to help the team environment, to help build trust, to help establish authenticity. But that is also one of the key elements to get buy-in, right? And as any leader knows, you have to get buy-in. We talk about the notion that storytelling is 22 times more effective than just reciting facts. And when you think about it from a student perspective, it should start early on. When you're writing those college essays, you should be relating it to, what your core value is and your experiences up until that point. When you're interviewing for internships, when you're interviewing for the real jobs, that is the whole vehicle to allow you to differentiate yourself, which I think we've all established by now, you almost have to do, given how crowded any opportunity is these days.
Which is it kind of here. I'll lead my next question with a story.
Yeah,
Perfect.
22-year-old son just graduated from college, physics major. Very proud of him. Did great. But just like you said, is now getting into this crowded market for employment, right? And so, as someone who's out there, in that job seeking mode, like thinking about what can he do to make himself more attractive? Like, is it possible for him to reframe some of his story to make him a better candidate for hopefully getting a job and moving back out of mom and dad's house eventually?
Well, I'll say 3,000%, but your physics major of a son won't appreciate my inaccuracy with scientific notation. But,
When he talks about those sort of things, it's way over my head.
but absolutely can. As a matter of fact, so Nick's son and I have chatted through the business of you quite a bit. And one day he asked me if he could send his friend to me. He said he's a mess. And he has applied and interviewed many times and has never gotten a job. So would I chat with him? So I hopped on the call with him. His name's Calvin. He's more than happy to have us tell his story. And I said, so Calvin, tell me what happens in the interview. You've interviewed multiple times. So clearly your resume is passing that initial test. And he said, they've told me that I'm a bit all over the place. And he hates, first, he's an introvert. Second, doesn't like talking about himself. Third, the question gets asked, so Calvin, tell me about yourself. And he goes into what Nick said, all of the facts of, well, when I was in kindergarten, I thought, oh gosh, any interview that starts with when I was in kindergarten, can we please stop? We're not going to march our way through our public programming. And so we started talking about his core values, and I made him tell me 3 stories about times where he really felt like he was the true version of himself. And one of them had to be from before high school. And as he told those stories, I said, oh, I have some ideas. So I'm going to have you take some notes. Are you a pencil paper kind of guy or a digital guy? He said, I'm a pencil paper guy in an automated world. And I said, and I think that's your superpower. So then he said, well, let's talk about that. So he started thinking about how being an introvert and how taking the time to be a paper pencil guy in an automated world made him see things differently. And it really brought out his strengths. I kid you not, I sent him to think about those stories, came back a week later, liked what he had to say. The next day he had 2 interviews and he didn't get a job. He got both jobs. So when he learned to reframe the story around his superpowers, he stood out. And the one job was at a place where he had been, it was the aquatics program at school. He had been a lifeguard and he wanted a management position. And they said to him, we didn't think we were going to hire you. You're just a nice kid. So we thought we would give you a chance with the interview. And you blew us away with the way you responded to the questions. And then the other job was an internship aligned with his major. So story on top of story. But yes, there's absolutely a way. And that is what the book does, is walk students through what they have to do to figure out their story. It's not just go figure it out. We'll help them.
And there's a little bit of a connection there too, because you mentioned like you were trying to help him work through like what makes you stand out or what makes you extraordinary, right, or unique. And you have through the Lead It Like Lasso, you have a masterclass that accompanies that, and that's kind of what you're trying to do is help people discover what is it that is different about you. So can you talk a little bit about how you designed that masterclass and what went into that process?
Yeah, I think it's more than the masterclass. I think it's both of the books. I think, probably one golden rule is if it feels like a lecture, it's not really an engaging experience. We like to design.
Both of them laughed. I think they agree.
So our goal in
classroom
everything
background ourselves, and we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know.
Our goal is whenever we're designing experiences, whether it was relating it to a show like Ted Lasso or the story and the business of you, we want to make people feel something, right? We want them to be curious. We want to challenge them. We want them to reflect. At the end of the day, I think that's what turns, whether it's masterclass content or the book content, into actual change. Of course, we want to make it fun. So, we attack it from the perspective of, okay, would we be engaged by such a thing? And then we bounce it off of, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands of people that we have actually interacted with and mentored, and kind of get their feel for, okay, did this make you think? Did this make you ask more questions? Did it challenge you? We realize reflection is uncomfortable, but did it push you enough? Did it make you think enough where you were like, yeah, I'm truly going to reflect on that? And I think if we keep those tenets in the back of our mind, curiosity, challenge, reflection, and does the content that we're creating, does it check all 3 of those boxes? We typically feel good about that, because to us that means that it's engaging and hopefully useful.
I have to say that I had Calvin pre-read our book, and then I had him take a look at the app that we're building to support it. And his reaction was, I'm going to make my younger brother do this. And why is that, Calvin? He said, because this is exactly what I needed. And when I asked him, Nick said another thing of, what did you think about the process? And he said, it's awkward. So you have to be willing to do that work. which is something that a lot of folks don't always dive right into.
And is there certain things about the pieces that are in the masterclass, like you had mentioned the importance of storytelling? Like, is there certain things built in there that are very successful for a course like that? Like, what are the most useful things to those that go through the masterclass?
So the masterclass for sure is built for folks who have seen Ted Lasso. We stop the masterclass at the beginning and say, go get your Apple TV subscription, because it's the connecting to the story that was in Ted Lasso that brings them to their own story, right? When you can start making those connections. So I think that is part of the playfulness, that the fun that we inject into that, in addition to our own storytelling. In each section, we have little clips from people that we have worked with where they connect a bit of the lesson to their own life. They're just short little clips to say, this is how that plays out in the real world, for sure. And it's interesting. What we have learned from building that is the lessons that we're including to see what makes things engaging and fun as we build an app, because our goal is to put a career coach in every kid's pocket with Blue, the app that we're building.
Right. So when you think about like taking on these different values and trying to promote them to this wider audience, right? Does it become at some point like some sort of an expedition in scaling to be able to make it reach a larger audience, make it something that you do want to put into every kid's hand as they're getting their career and college readiness programs that are taking place in schools? Are there challenges with that?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, but that's the fun of it. I think that's the fun of it, Jeremy. I mean, and if you ask us, right, we believe that whether it's the business of you or the app, the companion app that goes along with the book that we're building, Blue, every high school and every college student in America should have it. We're at the point where we fully realize, and we see it all the time. I'm in Georgia, Marnie's in Maryland. High school students specifically, when they're thinking about college and career readiness, they have a counselor where the ratios are 1 to several hundred people, right? There's just not enough bandwidth for students to get the resources and the time that they need, and for those counselors to give it to them. That's not a counselor issue. What's that?
I'll interject one thing there too. Like the ratios for students to counselors are just astronomically bad. But then you throw in that at least when my kids were going through high school, what they experienced was turnover at that position. So they were like every year getting a new counselor too, because we just
no
want people to
relationship
stay on those jobs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry,
100%.
I just had to point that out too.
No, I
think it's going to even further illustrate the point you're making.
Yeah. So what we are clearly trying to scale. I mean, we're trying to, and we have a discussion, I would say 7 days a week, 365 years, about, okay, we know that this works at a small level, right? We've literally used this methodology and approach, and we've seen instant results, right? Okay, how do we keep building the repeatable rhythms to amplify this message to the broader audience? This is part of it, just having a conversation just in general like this. But this is kind of where this is how we built a company in a space that we were completely unfamiliar with, right? Is we found ways to add value to voices larger than ours, right? We started punching above our weight class. And in turn, they would reciprocate to some level and amplify our little message. So our whole go-to-market strategy is all about that. We're lucky enough, the book just came out. We have schools that are now piloting this process. They're creating lesson plans around the book itself, which is a precursor to the Blue app that's coming down the pipe. And we're going to leverage that, right? The school system itself gets value because we know the framework works. But then they're willing to talk and communicate and to really vouch for the framework itself. And there are a whole bunch of different ways to scale. But what we're focusing on right now is to make sure that, and I would advise this to any business. I've been in part of 4 startups that went from 0 to very big. And in every one of them, right, it was, okay, how can we add value when we're small that's more than we take in, so people will amplify and help us basically crowdsource the excitement around a product fit that we know works. Marnie, fill in the gaps there. I feel like I blabbered for a little bit.
Oh, no. I mean, I think that's perfect. I have a different, a sort of a parallel path in the scaling conversation around a lot of folks that write books are doing that so that they can create a coaching program. And so there is, when you want to scale, you go from 1 to 1 to 1 to many to 1 to masses.
Mhm.
And we don't feel like it's scalable for us to say, well, we'll hop on a call with 10 students or 50 students. If we can build an app that's truly scalable, because we can put it in every kid's pocket. And, some parents are paying $150, $200 an hour for a career coach, a college advisor. There are lots of names for these folks. $2,000 just to help their students. We want to get something very reasonable that every student can have, because that really does help all. It is not just the folks that can afford $200 an hour that need help in figuring out their path. All the kids need this. So that's why we think technology is a way we can help scale. And we're very excited because we have already gotten school systems that are piloting the book and writing lesson plans, and happy to share those lesson plans. So we're happy to send, information to anybody listening to this on the free lesson plans of, here, go try it with your students and see what works.
David, I think that leads us into, I think, 6 pretty well. So if you just want to take it from there, we'll cut this little snippet out.
I was going to make sure. Can you hear that noise?
I heard something just for a snippet, but it's not bad.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. It's the washing machine. So.
And I tell you, my office is in a high school. And so passing times, there's a door that's right out into like one of the busiest hallways. So if you see my icon going to mute,
that is why.
Okay, well, I can just lead into the next question here. So you had mentioned Blue a few times, and on the website too, it's noted as a leadership playground. And you had mentioned, like, having it on devices so that it's accessible to students to kind of build their own roadmap for their future. Can you talk about Blue a little bit, and more particularly, like, how the AI kind of works into that program?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can start, and just a little bit of context here. In our book, The Business of You, it's a fable, and we have a lead character, Sydney, who happens to be in college, but you can kind of draw parallels to high school, where she stumbles across a mentor, and the magical mentor is the one that really helps her navigate through the departments of her life so she can be the CEO of her own life. But he also introduces her to an app, right? And within that, there are gamification features that challenge her and cause her to reflect on things like core values, to reflect on things like, okay, why it's so important to invest my time, to reflect on how to build my brand, and interview simulators and of that such. So that is what we're building. We basically wrote the book first as a requirements doc for the app. And one of the ways to describe it, I think, is I'm not sure if you're familiar with the app Duolingo to learn new languages, right? Where it's gamified, it's fun. Blue is kind of like Duolingo for personal development. We wanted to build really that fun and gamified way for young people and career changers to build out the departments of You, Inc. And we wanted to do it in such a way that it was personalized, right? There's where we truly understand what drives Nick as a person for the success of Nick Inc. So I can understand Nick's core values. I can understand what Nick's pet peeves are and what his weaknesses are. And then we intend, and we are building simulators, right, to walk the user through a journey, right? So once I understand, okay, Nick's interests are in marketing and Nick's core values are creativity, and integrity, we can build a simulator that is an interview simulator that allows Nick to have an interactive session to really build off of the information that we know about Nick. Of course, all in an anonymized way as we're feeding kind of the AI engine. We built EdTech platforms. We understand the whole notion of PII and security. But the use of AI specifically, since you asked about that, is to be adaptive and personalized to the learner, to the student, and to gamify it, right? I mean, it would have taken years, not a decade ago, to think of all the different permutations in which how you engage and interact with any particular user. But AI has allowed us, with our own models, to kind of personalize it in a fun and engaging type of way that Marnie and I have been working to train for almost 2 years now.
Yeah, and that's really great too. Just like how you're talking about how the AI can adapt and react to the interactions that any individual has with the program. So just to shift it a little bit, when you think about AI, obviously there's the ability to make those adaptations, but then do you see, since you've come in, from the business side of things too, and you have a lot of experience there, do you see where there are any shifts in leadership skills at all with the AI stuff? So not so much like someone working with AI to enhance their own skills in a certain area, but just more like what leadership skills are ending up being or shifting into. Is there any changes that you see there at all with the advances in AI?
I'm going to start with something, then I'll let Nick say the right answer. It's best that we end on the right answer. One thought that comes to mind as a former educator, I believe I'm a lifelong educator. If you woke me up in the middle of the night and asked me what I did, I'd say teacher. So I think it counts. There was always this shift being talked about. You're not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. And with AI, when frankly you don't need a sage on the stage because you've got AI sitting right in front of you, being punny, sagely, and all of it, its wisdom. So the leadership needs to be the guide on the side to help support the work. So that's my first attempt at an answer, and then we'll see what the right one is. Nick?
No, I think you absolutely nailed it. I think to some extent, leadership can be now more focused. We've talked about, Marnie and I often talk about this whole notion of command and control versus servant leadership, and how much more effective, and studies prove this, that servant leadership, working with others to grow, actually is, as opposed to just telling people what to do. And I think knowing that we have this great resource in AI that alleviates. I know when I was a leader in business and technology, so much time was, okay, are we building up the technical skills, right, to ensure that we can deliver whatever outcome we needed to deliver to the end customer. That burden isn't necessarily there as much from a leadership perspective, which to me is great, because now we can focus on all the things that servant leadership is all about, which is, okay, developing people, making sure they grow, not just from a technical standpoint, but from an interpersonal and softer skills standpoint. We can think more about strategy, and we've got this great tool to help us leverage and brainstorm on what those strategies are. So I think, there's a lot of concern and angst about AI, and rightly so. And we know that some jobs are going to be replaced, but we have to be, I think we should be optimistic about it, because there are going to be jobs and functions that we can't even imagine today that are coming down the pike. And I think as leaders, right, we can take this great technology and this advancement and everything that's changing on a day-to-day basis with AI, and really recenter and focus on the things that are all about building team and dynamics, trust, authenticity, all those softer type skills. So we're very biased, of course, because we talk about this every single day, and it's very important to us. But to me, AI really is putting the focus where it should be when we talk about leaders, and where we've wanted to be for a couple of decades now, when servant leadership first became popular.
And I'd like to add, teachers are the ultimate servant leaders in the classroom with the students. So they're leading the students themselves when they don't necessarily have all the answers. And what is the most popular question that is asked in any classroom? When am I ever going to use this? I think the fair answer is now, well, none of us know. And so let's talk about what these skills are really building in you. Math is not math for the sake of math. It's doing push-ups for your brains. It's helping you learn how to problem solve. It's helping you learn how to use logic. It's helping you with persistence, right? All of these things are elements of developing your core values and all those servant leadership skills within the students. And we need to be really comfortable saying that, because the answer, well, you're going to use this when you manually do your accounting. When? No, that's not true. Right? That's not how it's going to happen. What are you really teaching in social studies? Story, history, right? How systems work, how people work, how community team dynamics work. We need to be very comfortable with saying that. Sorry, I clearly just stood on a on a soapbox for a minute, so I'll get back down. But
but it's really interesting to hear you talk about it. Maybe I haven't considered it through this lens necessarily, but David and I talk AI like just about every day also. And if it's not with each other, it's with, many other.
Whoever will listen.
Yeah. And like I always, when I talk about AI, I like to talk about the HI that goes along with it, that human intelligence, right? And so to hear you frame it as, whether it be a guide on the side that AI is, or that teachers, still need to be, or from that servant leadership perspective, right? Because you're not going to get servant leadership from artificial intelligence. That is where the human comes in. And to hear you say, like, also, Marnie, that teachers are the ultimate servant leaders, and I think part of what has to go along with that too is there's some vulnerability that you need to expose within yourself. So how do you coach people that it's okay to show your vulnerability and, like you said, not have all of the answers, but still portray that leadership role?
Well, have you seen Ted Lasso? Because, I mean, that is a brilliant example, right? He goes from
I feel like I led you into the answer of your.
Thank you. Open the door. I'll walk through that. You're right. So Ted Lasso was an American football coach who went to the UK to coach football, which over there is actually soccer. And he knew nothing technical about the sport, but what he knew was leadership. Servant leadership specifically. He understood teamwork. He understood how to get the best out of folks. And he did that by being vulnerable himself. So I only partially joke when I say watch Ted Lasso, but that is an example of how it works in reality. Nick, what were you thinking?
Same thing. I mean, leaders who model vulnerability are the ones who create cultures of honesty and care. And you're right. You guys mentioned it's hard to do that sometimes. But the reality of it is works. If there's one message I can tell my 21-year-old son, and I have told him this, right? It's the one lesson that I learned way too late in life, which is it's okay to admit what you don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And as soon as I started doing that, as soon as somebody, my mentor at the time, banged it into my head for the 5th, 10th, 20th time, my world opened. All of a sudden people, started coming up to me and talk to me about things. I felt more comfortable having conversations. I suffered from this great imposter syndrome that was immediately gone. I had anxiety, panic attacks, all about all these things. It's because I felt like I needed to have all the right answers because I was in a position of leadership. And we do talk to educators. Marnie is an educator. You guys are educators, right? That is a big problem, right? It's hard to admit that you don't know something when you're leading a classroom, whether it's the children or the parents of the children. But there's a way to do that, and it requires a commitment to yourself, but it also requires practice. And it's a little bit of a jump off the ledge moment for a lot of people, but I guarantee you, if you do that, trust me when I say that worlds will be, all of a sudden doors that were locked will start opening for you, because people respond to that in a way that and trust opens up in a way that never really exposes itself when you refuse to get naked or be vulnerable.
Yeah, I think there's a loss of control that people fear that, I think especially from teachers, I see that
For sure.
often when I'm sharing a new tool or something with some teachers. They're like, if I don't master this tool before my students, I'm never going to be able to answer the questions they have about it. When, if you just turn it over, just, turn
If you
that
can
knob
unlock
back a little bit.
curiosity, right? Be curious, not
Yes.
judgmental. Maybe
Yeah.
we can all learn this. What questions do we have? What would we like it to do? Let's see if it can do it, right?
Right. So I think you have to give up some of that uncertainty, some of that doubt, in order to make it that learning experience for the kids then. Yeah.
Yeah, at this point too, it might be good to ask the students what they know and maybe get some help
Absolutely.
well, right?
That's
Because they're using it in a lot of different ways. So
it's sort of ironic. When my son was in 5th grade, I was the math supervisor and I was in charge of implementing smart boards across the school district. And there was a training where the teachers were allowed to sign up by their comfort level with smart boards. So the top experts were 5s, and my son asked if he could come with me that day because they had off. And I said, all right, I'll sign us up for the 4s, the next to the, now he knew way more than I did about this. And his teacher was really excited because they figured he could just come and help the other teachers because he was so tech savvy. No one else in his school was above where we were. What was funnier still is while we were in there, the trainer was doing something and somebody asked about a specific feature, and David nudged me and Sheila and I said, well, raise your hand. And the trainer looked over and he raised his hand and he said, actually, if you go up to that button and pull down to here and shift over on the right, you can get a highlighter. So, when they opened it up, everyone in the room cheered for 5th grade David. But it is interesting when you allow that to happen. You really, rising tide really does lift all ships, even if the first tide you rise is just a 4-foot 5th grader.
So I want to get into a couple different things here that I think Nick, you had mentioned a mentor, right? So if we could talk just a little bit about what do you find is the importance of having mentors, and what advice do you give people who feel like they don't have a mentor or don't know how to ask for feedback?
I'm so glad you asked us to stay for another hour and a half. I'm just kidding. Nick, go ahead.
Well, I think, we talk about, in Lead It Like Lasso, we reference the diamond dogs, and in the business of you, we talk about surrounding yourself with a personal board of advisors, not to different than a company surrounds themselves with a board of advisors. And when you think about the different roles that fit on those boards of advisors, we talk about 3 specifically, but it could be more than that. Connectors, people that will help you expand your reach and your network. We talk about challengers, like people who will challenge you, that you trust to stretch you and push you. And then we talk about mentors, those that have been there and done that before you. And I think each one of those is critically important. You mentioned specifically about mentors. They've been there. They've done that. They're that guide for you. And to me, I don't know of a successful person that hasn't had either an informal or formal way at my age in 50s that did not have somebody to help bounce ideas off of, who's been there, who's done that from a mentoring standpoint. And I would also like to add, especially there's a lot of talk today about the differences between generations, whether you're Gen X, Gen Y, the new one, Gen Alpha, what have you, and how different people are. I think for those people that are out there that are listening, being a mentor, you get almost as much value out of as opposed to being a mentee. And that is, we've learned when we're working with these young students and we're talking about the business of you, we're learning a perspective of a different generation and learning so much about what their perspective is and things I didn't even know existed, and their approach and how they definitely approach things. So this whole notion of reverse mentoring is real, and it's a big thing. And I hope more people, Marnie and I have a lot of time, Marnie much more so than I, to actually mentor people. And I hope more adults find the time to do it, knowing that not only are you helping somebody who's younger, but it's a way for you to grow significantly as well.
In
Marnie,
surprising ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned what happens for folks who don't have a mentor. Now, the interesting thing is that with the internet in your pocket, you can take a look at folks that you admire and see how they got there. So in a way, someone on your board of advisors, you don't necessarily have to know them. They're not going to be as influential as someone that you can talk to, but you certainly can take a look at who you friend, follow, and frequent, they say. Where are you paying attention online? Who are you paying attention to? And are you tracking what has their path been? When the world's your oyster with things you can search, you can figure out how someone got to the role that you were interested in or the job you were interested in. And the other thing I will say is I walked into a class my first day as assistant principal in high school, the first period, and a kid from the back of the class shouted out a big hello. And I thought, am I supposed to turn and yell at this kid or what? And when I did, he had a big grin on his face. And I thought, well, I should not yell at that. And so this was 12 years ago. He is 31 now. I still am involved in his life. I definitely became a mentor to him. And I asked him, why did you shout hello to an assistant principal in a black suit and clicky heels? I felt like I was intimidating, in class. And he said, I don't know, he just looked like somebody that would help. So there's a whole school system of grownups that are in that job because they want to help, because they're surely not in it for the money. So try to connect, build those relationships with the teachers, talk to them.
Yeah. And if we could talk a little bit here too, just about, you had mentioned like the personal board of advisors. So creating feedback loops so that you know how to grow, or like, I know even just thinking about our podcast, like over the last, Jeremy and I have been doing this podcast for about 3 years now. Well, it's tied to our YouTube channel, but all the different decisions that him and I have made have come from seeing what other people are doing. So like sometimes it's things on YouTube or things on LinkedIn, and it sparks kind of an idea in our own mind to try something different that we haven't quite done yet. And I think that that's super helpful. And it touches on your point that the feedback that you're getting, or maybe the ideas that you're getting, they don't have to be someone that's directly tied to you in person or things like that. You can glean things from off of online, as you mentioned. So if, and maybe this is part of that answer, but if somebody doesn't know how to start that process, and maybe they are more of like an introvert or something like that, and they just don't really know how to start getting that feedback, or what would be the first step you would have them take to start that process?
Nick, do you want to start with?
Read our book. That would be the first step, right? Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we talk about different strategies in our book. I mean, I think you bring up a couple, right? Like follow, frequent, those that you have found have similar interests, because as you guys both have said, whether it was David, Marnie, Jeremy earlier, you know, we have access to all these different types of information and content at our fingertips. The question is, are you accessing the right content? So, you know, we recommend, okay, if you don't know anybody, if you're introverted, all right, let's first identify who you should like, frequent, and follow. And then let's start thinking about, okay, well, at the end of the day, I would love to approach this person to get their feedback. I think Marnie did this with my son, and my son said, you know, I would love to, you know, have a conversation with the CEO of NVIDIA. And Marnie's like, great. Did you reach out to him? You know, not like that's going to happen, but that was the start. Okay, this is how you might introduce yourself to him. And Connor sent him a connection request on LinkedIn. Still hasn't heard back, but, you know, we'll work on it. Okay, let's break that down a little bit, right? Let's talk about your professors in college or your teachers in high school, and start thinking about, you know, what aligns with your interests, and how you can start to engage with those people, whether it's through office hours, or do you belong to church groups or some outside of school service, teachers, professors, what have you, family members. But I think thinking about who is in alignment with your view, you can think about the end game, the big kahuna, the one that is, you know, would be the best thing in the world. And once you start doing that, and then you start breaking it down to people that might be in your network or on your periphery of your network, it does not seem as intimidating. Now Marnie's going to give you the right answer.
Well, and the trick is, I'm just going to add to it to figure out what questions that you want to ask. So especially introverts, we have found, for all the introverts on the call, the book Quiet by Susan Cain will make you realize being introverted is a superpower. And for all the extroverts on the call, read Quiet so that we can become more introverted, because freely admitted, I'm a recovering extrovert that's working on, you know, becoming more introverted. But learning to ask questions, it is shocking how much people want to help. And if you can just ask for advice, or an easy one is, Jeremy, I am super curious how you landed in this position. My son, myself, whoever would love to have a job like yours. How did you get there? I suspect, Jeremy, you're more than happy to share your path on how you got there. And so simple questions on, you know, don't start with the heavy lift of, hey, Jeremy, it was nice to meet you. I'd really like to have that job. Would you be willing to, you know, write a letter of recommendation for me, or, you know, open a door for me? How about just start simple with, like, how did you get there?
So a couple of years ago, I was reading or something, or I sat in a meeting where someone was talking about the 60-year curriculum. I don't know, are either of you familiar with that?
I'm not, but I'm writing it down.
Yeah, it's kind of based upon this idea that those students that are entering into our school system right now need to prepare for a lifetime of career changes that are going to happen over their 60-year academic and professional working years of their life. If you consider the rising life expectancies and
Yeah,
things that,
yeah.
and people are probably going to be changing jobs at multiple points along the way
Sure.
through that whole process, right? So I want us to think about maybe like specific moments within that 60-year thing. Someone who's at the beginning point of entering into, a college or career moment, like a recent high school graduate or something. And what sort of advice would they need? Then pull it apart and go down that timeline a little bit further. Maybe someone who's like mid-career, but maybe aren't feeling as fulfilled in that position that they're in at that moment. What advice might you want to offer for them? And then someone who's maybe a little bit closer to that end of that period, and they're thinking about, I'm winding down maybe my professional life, but I don't want to stop learning.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what advices would you give at those different moments?
Well, I think you answered the broad advice that applies to all three of those, which is everything should be viewed through the lens of learning, and just building on that, right? Even more broad advice is stay curious and keep iterating. I'll give you one line, I think, for each of those, and then as usual, Marnie will probably give you the best answer. But I think for the early, the students, right, they're in that perspective. I think that's all about experimenting with what drives them, their identity. I think for mid-career professionals, and I see this all the time, they go off course, right? A lot of times, and I think mid-career, it's all about reconnecting with what your purpose, right, and what it means to be Nick. And then I think more seasoned leaders, the end of career, it's a focus on legacy, and what am I going to leave behind? Now, I think all three of those, whether it's experiment with identity and purpose and legacy, I think can start very, very early. And I think you're going to say, Nick, that sounds stupid to think about your legacy when you're 21 years old. But we advocate for that because we realize it might change. But when you the earlier you start thinking about your legacy, you start building bumper pads, which then start impacting decisions in the here and now. So Marnie, take it away from here and tell me what I missed.
Well, I've taken notes, so clearly he had the right answer. But it reminded me of a few things. First, Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, that if you're only thinking you're trying to reach one thing and not continually trying to grow and improve, at some point you're going to feel really flat because you've gotten where you think you were aiming for and you feel like there's nothing else beyond that. So I think that's where Nick was talking to, reconnecting with purpose. In a shocking turn of events, I have a story to go with it. My daughter called me from the beach in Hawaii where she was working remotely with a marketing job that she'd gotten based on her degree in business, minor in marketing. So people definitely assuming she's living her best life because she's calling me from the beach in Hawaii. But what she said was, I'm not really feeling fulfilled. I don't think I'm making a big impact. The job is not requiring all of my skills. What should I do? And I said, well, my friend needs a fourth grade English teacher. Do you want to do that? She said, yeah, I think I do. And so she is now teaching fourth grade for her second year, loving it, doing a great job. So I think to Nick's point, figuring out your identity and where to reconnect with your purpose. That might happen, for the record, she's 24. That happened when she was 22, that we've just made a pivot early on. And then I had already written down legacy. So as usual, he's, and normally, honestly, I steal the answer, but he stole the answer.
Never.
All right. Well, that's going to bring us into our final questions here. And so we're going to we do this on our podcast. We do our lightning rounds. And so we would hope to get an answer from both of you if we can. And we're gonna start. Jeremy and I kind of go back and forth on these. So we'll start with the very first question. Either one of you can go first. Favorite Ted Lasso character, but you can't choose Ted.
All right, I'll say Roy Kent, especially he's on our mind this week because we do a newsletter and it's all about cussing and profanity. So everyone loves Roy Kent, as do I. So Roy Kent.
I'm going to go with Higgins. I think that's a little, I mean, they're all favorites for me, but I just love Higgins and his wisdom just out of nowhere. He just seems to say the right thing at the right time. He's a bit of an aspirational figure for me.
And I tell you what, I think it's an underrated episode when they all went to have Christmas at his family's house.
The Christmas episode.
Best episode.
And he remembers where
Yeah.
everybody's from. You know, he remembers a little thing about it's a masterclass in management leadership of a team. Love it.
Perfect. How about which book besides your own do you think every leader or teacher should read at least once?
Go Giver by Bob Berg, John David Mann.
I'm going to go with Think Again by Adam Grant.
All right. One song that instantly boosts your energy before a big moment.
So dumb. The tiger. I will jump around. I'm going to try to keep my feet planted.
So if I can, we just interviewed Alfonso Mendoza, Dr.
Yeah.
We know
and
the Fonz.
his favorite song was also "Eye of the Tiger" from way back when he was in elementary. So that's awesome.
I'm going to go with the song that gets me going is "Till I Collapse" from Eminem.
Okay, yeah,
cool. One thing you wish more leaders would start doing immediately.
Oh, self-reflection for themselves and everybody that works for them.
If you're not doing it, listen longer. I think people are going to tell you everything if you give them enough space.
All right, and then our final question: what's one tech tool or app you actually love using every day?
Oh, I've forgotten my answer to my question. Nick, go ahead while I rethink.
I think Marnie's would be some AI model, probably ChatGPT.
Oh, thank you. That is what I would. Yes, ChatGPT for sure. We'll take that.
You know, I've been in technology my entire career. I've yet to find the app that's like, yeah, I love going into this, and that's what we're hoping to build with Blue. Of course, I think everybody likes to go, see what's going on in LinkedIn or their favorite social media platform.
But they're all missing something. I was thinking LinkedIn, but it's just to connect, but it doesn't build all the connections the way I'd want to build them.
What is y'all's favorite app? Maybe it'll turn on to
the tables are turning.
Yeah. You got anything good out there that we haven't heard about that you just love going into every day?
Well, the one that I'm in the most and probably need to be in less is my ESPN Fantasy Football League app. A little less time in that app, but
why? How are you doing? Are you saying your team is underperforming?
I'm 3-3, I think, after this week. So
and you don't have a lot of Ravens on your team. All right.
Football is a sore subject because I'm a Jets fan and Marnie's a Ravens fan, and we got one win between us.
Yeah, I don't know what the Jets need to do, but the Ravens just need to get healthy.
Correct, but immediately. We have a bye next week, and then everyone's got to be Iron Man from here on out.
Jets need to be relegated. We need to put the Premier League system in so teams that are bad get relegated to a lower division, and I think that's the Jets for sure.
Well, I suppose I didn't quite answer. I would have to agree with Marnie, and probably ChatGPT is the one that I'm in the most often, but it might not always be for work. I tend to ask it for a lot of cooking advice. And so that's what I'm pulling out of it right now.
Excellent.
We got a foodie. I like it.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know we're had a great conversation here, but want to give you kind of the last moment here to let people know where can they get a hold of you? Where could they find your book? If people want to maybe hear about things that you have coming down the pipeline, anything that you'd like to share along those lines?
So both of our books are available on Amazon. So Lead It Like Lasso or The Business of You. thebusinessofyou.ai is the website, and we have a waiting list there. So if folks are interested in seeing what's happening with us, that would be a good place. info@thebusinessofyou.ai. If there's any educator out there that would like lesson plans for the book, happy to share them. And we are in social media, at Blue, the Business of You, everywhere. So we're easy to find because that's us on all the places.
And our
we'll
names
make
are
sure
rather
to link
unique
those
on
things in our
LinkedIn
show
as
notes.
well.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick.
No, I was just going to say we have pretty unique names on LinkedIn. We'd love for people to connect. Marnie Stockman or Nick Coniglio. The best part about this whole experience in writing the books are all the different people that we have met. So we'd love to connect with anybody that's interested in talking about the same things that we've talked about today.
Perfect. And we'll share the links in the show descriptions. But we just want to really thank you again one more time for such a great conversation that we had today.
Oh, thank you. This is fun.
Yeah, you guys are
Thanks a
awesome.
lot.
Appreciate you.